Okay, hang on.
Cool. Ready, right?
Yes, we are.
Sweet. Okay, guys. Hi, it's Sol and Grace. Happy Monday. And we are back, as always, for your Monday mojo and motivation booster to kick away any Monday blues if you've got that going on, and to make sure that you start the week on the right foot. So in case you missed us last week, we talked about 3 signs that you're working in a toxic environment, and we shared 10 sanity tips to help you stay sane and 5 ways to get proactive and be part of the solution. So if you missed out on that, be sure to catch the replay over at bit.ly/changeschooltv19, which we will share the link to later, as always. But make sure to check out those tips if that's something that resonates with you or is something that's going on in your work world right now. So tonight's episode we're on episode 20. And I know last week I said it would be a short and sweet episode, and I lied because it was actually really long, but it's just because we had so much we wanted to share. But tonight's session will be short and sweet. We just wanted to cover a little impromptu topic that we're finding to be more and more relevant and pertinent for a lot of people who are embarking on careers, searching for new careers, or shifting careers. So tonight's topic is how to find work abroad opportunities. So if that's you, we're going to be sharing a couple tips around, well, for one thing, some obvious but good reminder reasons for why working abroad can be such a great thing and a positive experience. We'll also share some key things to consider and start thinking about or planning ahead for if you are thinking about exploring work opportunities abroad or relocating. And we will wrap up with some pro tips to help you find work abroad opportunities, as well as a few links. We'll just share a couple, but mostly we'll pop in all the links that we've curated for you in our blog that we'll share tomorrow. As well as a little downloadable tip sheet, because as you know, we always like to give you some juicy free bonuses that you can download and pin up and use whenever you need. So that was my little rant. And for those of you jumping in, again, just as a quick recap, we're on episode 20, and we are talking about how to find work abroad opportunities. And Grace, how are you going over there? Can I?
Hey guys.
I'm going to throw it over to you if you're ready, yeah?
Totally. So I am just, as I do, clicking away on my phone over here. But couple of things, just as always, I'm going to be here to tell you that if you are joining us live, give us some thumbs, give us some hearts, give us whatever else you think is worth it. But it's always super cool to see where people are joining in. And tonight is like a short and sweet episode. So we know that sometimes people join in a little bit later, but just hopefully you guys jump on faster. So just let us know where you're signing in from. Hey, Kimberly. And just, people are watching us from around the world, so it's always super nice to see where people are joining in. So say hi and where you're signing in from, or just any comments that you want along the way. Okay, so today's topic is something that, as Sol said, we're really seeing as a topic a lot of people are wanting us to cover. And we're going to talk about, I guess, firstly, what are the reasons to work abroad? So there's so many different reasons. I mean, we are moving into a world where people are freelancing more or starting their own businesses or being solopreneurs, right? We're also shifted into a world where there's more digital nomadism, right? People are starting to live not just in one location, but in multiple places. So some reasons that people would want to live abroad is you want to have global exposure. You want to be able to live somewhere that you've always dreamt of and doing work that you love, or even getting a new skill in the new country or city that you move into. It doesn't even have to necessarily be moving to a new city, a new country. It could be moving to a new city. Other reasons, perhaps, are you want new perspectives, right? Maybe you want to shift industry and location for a complete change. Maybe you've had a breakup and you're like, you know what, I'm done in this country where my ex-boyfriend is, or my city where my ex-boyfriend is, and I'm going to live abroad.
I'm out.
That is totally normal too. Okay. Maybe you're running away from your child. That is not advisable. But that happens. Okay. So the other thing is sometimes you're wanting to, maybe you've left a job, you've started your own business, and you are wanting to reduce or adjust your cost of living. So a lot of the times, moving to a new country of a lower cost of living can be great, or an advantage for those of you that are wanting to shift and starting your own business, or starting your freelance or solopreneur career. A lot of the times it might be because you just want to change, and that's fine too. Another is, you want to learn about yourself and the world, or perhaps your partner has gotten an opportunity in a new country and you're looking for opportunities, and you both don't want to move until both have opportunities there. So there's like a whole range of reasons why people want to work abroad. And, I think something that we're not necessarily going to touch on, in this one, but is that if you are a digital nomad and you're wanting to shift into different countries all the time, we're not really talking about that at the moment, but there will be, future episodes where we can touch on that as well. Really, right now, we're talking about, how do you find a job opportunity or a position overseas that can be either east to west or west to east. Pretty general, right? So what are some of the things we need to think about, Sol?
So I've got some positive stuff and some harder stuff to kind of navigate. Sometimes it really depends on where you're looking to go and sort of what your situation is. So I'll start with kind of the easier ones to talk about, but probably take a little bit more research depending on the different markets you're looking at. So first and foremost, one that I personally don't love is visa issues, but they are obviously real issues and things that are going to impact the ease with which you might make a shift, and also like the amount of paperwork and desktop research you might need to do. So we're not experts on, immigration laws and policies, but suffice to say that it is something that you want to look into. Maybe one of the first things you should look into if you are looking at different markets or countries, probably not cities, but if you are looking for a big geographical jump, then it's worth looking at, embassy sites in some cities, such as Singapore and Hong Kong, just to list a few, in Asia, which are more transient and tend to have a lot of expats. They do tend to have expat services and organizations or consultancies that can also offer some advice. And I guess in the same breath, it's also looking at things like work permits and sort of understanding what policies are around that, which vary country to country. And in some cases, once again, just to use Singapore as an example, those policies can change even multiple times within a year. So it is really trying to stay on top of that, getting the latest information on that. Sometimes it's harder to get consistent information. So I would say as a pro tip on this note, try to get different sources or multiple sources in a sense to kind of validate different bits and bobs, because sometimes that can be really frustrating to kind of really get your head around. But really important to understand how different markets work. I know Grace could probably speak more to like Australia and their point system, for example, versus, in the US, obviously it's very different to get a work visa. In Singapore, there's also multiple different types of working permits or visas that you can get. So it's just trying to understand those things and sort of cross-check, fact-check with multiple sources when you can. So that's kind of more the practical, not so sexy and fun stuff. Other things to think about, more on a lifestyle or work style or cultural environment. side of things is things like language barriers, right? Now, obviously, I think for most places where there's an abundance of global or international job opportunities, language doesn't tend to be a huge thing in terms of your everyday living. However, in terms of immersion and being able to connect and really understand and feel part of the local culture, obviously having a little language skill under your belt is a plus and can really help to put down any potential barriers. It's one less thing to worry about. So depending on where you're going and what language abilities you already have, you may want to think about looking at like online language courses, and it's not necessarily that you have to learn a new language fluently, even just like top 20 survival words, right? Or greeting words or basic things that can get you by are always good to have. And will just help you to probably make a transition, or if you're planning on spending some time there ahead of time, just helping you to get around a little bit easily. So language is one part, but also cultural differences and customs. I think that's a really big one that is, important in terms of lifestyle, but also down the line work style, right? It's always good to kind of understand, especially as companies are getting more and more global, we're getting more and more diverse teams pretty much anywhere you go in the world these days. So I think it's almost kind of a necessity, whereas before it might have been like a plus plus. I think now in today's context, it's really a bit of a necessity to understand the basics of different cultural norms, practices, customs, simple nuances when it comes to communication, interactions, and there's different ways to get that information. You can read up about it, or maybe if you know people who are working or living in a market that you're interested in, or if you know people who have that sort of cultural background themselves, that's always really cool, because then you can kind of ask like the sort of nitty-gritty questions, around customs and normal ways of behavior and interactions. So language and culture, if you're like me and that's something you love, then it doesn't, it shouldn't be a painful thing. It can be quite interesting to learn about those things. And of course you learn as you go as well. Excuse me, guys. What else have we got? Logistics. So again, not super fun, but definitely can save you a lot of headache if you're thinking about those things. And I mean logistics both in terms of like the actual physical moving, but also in terms of finding work, particularly in terms of finding work. And so what I mean by logistics in this context is, where to look for jobs and what type of work can you expect. So like I mentioned earlier, just to use Australia as another example, right? The point system means that there will be certain types of jobs at certain times, right, that you can expect would be easier to get based on, their economic needs, for example. And similarly, other markets may have, certain industries or sectors that are much that are thriving vis-a-vis other types of industries or sectors. So it's always good to have a good idea of what's going on and have that big picture, not just career landscape, but also what's going on with the economy, what are the social dynamics there. I think the more you can sort of, even pick up a local newspaper or read from an international news site, right, more about a certain market or country of interest, it's good to just have that context and insight. So other bits to think about: cost of living and finance or money management, right? Now this, obviously there's multiple levels to this. One is, in terms of managing the financials of making a transition. It may be thinking about cost of living in the country that you're looking at. It may be even things like looking at banking, right, and how easy that's going to be and how all of that can work. So that's kind of the life admin stuff, but also kind of practical forward planning, things to think about, ways to make moves or that you may be looking at a little bit easier and not so stressful.
And even, sorry, can I jump in there on the cost of living is, in some countries like the US, and we're no expert in, I guess, key legal stuff, but I'm sure there's a ton of people out there that can help. But, in the US, you need to have a credit rating before you can even rent a place, right? Yeah. So thinking about those things when you're moving, or you know, having enough down deposit for a place that you want to rent. Think about how that's going to work if you're moving there without a company, right? So I think just bearing in mind the difficulties, if it's not just Airbnb-ing a place, right, of say getting a longer term rent. So a longer term rent.
No, that's a great point.
One question, sorry, I'm seeing, hey, Sherilyn, she can hear us loud and clear, but we'll look at this later, but just so I don't forget, can you tell us a little more about managing friendships and work relationships in a foreign country? Cool. Okay, we'll touch on that at the end.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
nice.
Great question.
Nice. Okay, so we're gonna, you'll remind us to get back to that, right, Grace? Okay. So in the meantime, what other points did we think of? So another thing I want to bring up is sort of around mindset and how you can already start to think a little bit more globally. So I know it seems really minor, but particularly if you're starting to reach out or explore job opportunities or trying to connect with companies or individuals for, you know, exploratory calls or even Skype interviews or virtual meetings, do already start thinking about time differences, local holidays, and bear that in mind with scheduling. I think sometimes, like I said, it seems minor, but these little details do make a difference. And especially if you're talking to a prospective employer, I think it goes a long way to show that you are already thinking in those terms, that you're mindful of things like certain holidays or, again, sort of working norms, cultures, and customs. So just something to think about if you are interacting and reaching out and having those conversations already. Another point, more, again, probably on the life admin side of things, but just to add to the sort of banking, visa, all that stuff that we don't love, but is super important, is, you know, medical insurance, healthcare, travel insurance, things like that. Again, it's like sometimes we overlook these things or we don't think about it, especially if we're working someplace we've been for a long time or we're in our home city. So you might not always think about that stuff, but definitely good to look into that as well. And if you are shifting with a company, then it's also good to just have an idea of what health coverage you get with that or how all of that is sorted. Last point I will share is probably more relevant for those of you who are in the early stage of your career. So maybe, you know, either by age, so maybe you're around somewhere under 30 or a fresh grad, or maybe your first or second career and you're really looking to go abroad. I would say, you know, there's different ways to kind of be smart. It's always a bit easier to find work abroad when you're there. So if, you know, teaching English, interning, volunteering your time, if any of those things are of interest and available to you, that can be a really nice entry point or starting way to start working in a new market and get acquainted to a new culture and environment while you're also looking for your next career step or your next work opportunity. I think I cut out a little bit there, but hopefully it's okay.
That's all right. I think you can catch up as well on our recap, or even the replay a little bit. But definitely, I think the main thing was, you know, just if you're in your early career, is looking at different opportunities, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, cool. So if we're cutting out, just let us know. You know, that's the beauty and beast of technology. So I guess we're going to share some pro tips for finding work abroad. So a few things, you know, there's quite a few tips, and we are going to have a cheat sheet, which we'll share with you as always, you know, the following day as well. So don't worry about the links, just, you know, feel free to, you know, just ask us and or comment on this video and we'll share the links with you afterwards. But okay, pro tips for finding work abroad. One is, you know, a lot of the times when people move or are looking to move into a new country or a new city, they're not always looking at the current news or current situation. So something we always like to say is, okay, start gathering information and news gathering. And it doesn't mean you have to read the newspaper every day, but subscribe to like news feeds or have Feedly or some sort of platform like that that allows you to start, you know, filtering news that is particular to that region or that city or that country, and really allow you to get a well-rounded picture of the place that you're going to go into. So economic, political, social, all of those things, right? And get an understanding of what that market is really needing. So what are those market needs? Where are those market trends? So like if a government is pushing innovation, or if a government is pushing, you know, sustainability or technology or whatever those things are, the reason we're going to find that out is either through our networks or through news feeds, right? And so the first thing to do is think about whatever areas you're thinking of moving into. How can you subscribe to information or news that's going to give you an understanding of the market landscape, right? And those things can change so quickly. So the more that you have that, whether it's through Google Trends or Feedly, the quicker you're then able to stay on top of things, right? And any news sectors the governments are also, any news sectors the governments are pushing can also be found on the other tip, which we're going to share, is government websites, right? So sometimes that can be on government websites or chambers of commerce, which is we're going to talk about a little bit later as well. But, you know, look at government websites, see what they're looking for, see what areas or, you know, and, you know, think about what are the skills that are most needed. So I believe 10 skills needed for moving overseas, right? Or for moving into Australia. So at one point I remember it was like hairdressing skills or something. So if you're a hairdresser or were a hairdresser at that point, you'd probably get a visa really easy. But, you know, look at government websites to see what are the most needed skills, as well as, like we were talking about, the visa requirements, how difficult it is, or whether you need specific qualifications for immigration or visas. I mean, I think in the US, like if you're a model, you get a certain type. If you're an artist, you get a certain type. If you're a startup, you have a startup visa, all these things. There's so many different ones out there now. And, you know, it's really good to get your know of the landscape, but also the government initiatives that they're pushing. The other thing to think about when you're looking for job boards or recruitment sites like monster.com, so Facebook groups, right? There's a ton of Facebook groups out there, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but Facebook groups can also be a source of information for what types of jobs you could find or what types of opportunities are really bustling, you know, in that country or in that city. If you're within an organization and you're looking to shift, you know, maybe think about where that, and you're open to shifting, right? Maybe think about where that company has other locations or other head offices or foreign offices, and ask for an internal transfer. If they don't, you know, maybe you can see if there is a partner business that you could connect with or move over, and even trial like a 6-month period or something, right? Sometimes they have rotations that you can do within organizations, so that's an opportunity as well. The other thing to think about is like, how do you localize your resume? So a lot of the times UK English, US English, Australian English, if that counts, you know, like think about your best practices for the country that you're going into, but also your spelling, right? So UK versus US, you know, O and U, or just the O in certain words, right? Or say in Asia, it may be more common to have a photo and your weight and all these other things that you might not think of. I mean, they're still pretty traditional, but you know, these are things to know, which goes back to Solonia's point about cultural nuances and cultural differences. And just understanding how all of that works will help you to localize your resume so much more. And, you know, maybe even in some places it's better to make a video resume, right? You just don't know. But these are things to start thinking about. The other is to think about your own network. So we have, even if you think I don't really have a strong list, or I don't have that many people in my contacts or in my address book, that's rubbish, because you can start making them now. And two, everyone or most of you should have LinkedIn in a professional environment. And three is that just everyday people in your email address, right? If you don't ask, you don't know. So reach out to people in your immediate network. Reach out to even friends in your wider network, right? Tell them that you're looking for opportunities. Tell them that you're exploring moving into these countries or these cities, right? And what market you're looking into, what field you're looking into, what type of a position, because maybe you're open to moving into a new country and taking a lower position because you really want to move there, right? Those are things that we sort of discussed in our online course, which, we'll reopen for enrollment again shortly. But these are things to think about, is what are the priorities for you moving in the first place, and then kind of deciding what's important, right? The field or the salary, or just moving into a new country. And really ask for a referral. Be specific when you reach out to your network. So obviously share that you're exploring opportunities and where your markets or your fields are, but also ask them, could you help me with this? One, an introduction to someone in that market, or two, someone that has lived there. They don't have to have lived there. They don't have to be living there right now. Ask them if they know of any ideas, or even people who are from that home country but are living abroad, right? If you're in Singapore or in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Indonesia, a lot of these places, there's so many of us living abroad in these countries that within your network, you probably have a United Nations, gathering already. So the other thing to think about is social networking. Facebook is amazing for the Facebook groups, right? LinkedIn groups, there's expat and local groups. So think about looking for terms, maybe when you're searching on Facebook for things like digital nomads, or digital nomad careers, or overseas jobs, or freelance jobs, or any remote work, etc., right? Think about all of those things when you're looking at Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups, and look at not just the expat groups, but there's a lot of expat groups on Facebook if you're moving to Hong Kong or Singapore or Indonesia. But where do you also find the local groups, right? Where you can really immerse yourself and even start being in there for a while to start seeing what type of information is being discussed in there. And people, you'll be surprised at maybe that's where you gather your news versus a traditional news source. So, okay, last 3 points is networking, right? Definitely. You will get more by being on the ground. So something to think about is, do you want to go to the country that you're thinking about moving to and maybe spend whatever time you can on a tourist visa and just explore? It might not even be to find work. It might just be to see whether you enjoy it, whether, it's the right type of environment for you. And at the same time, you can go to a ton of different meetups or, communities that are out. And you can use websites such as Eventbrite, PTix for a lot of the Asian region, meetups.com. There's so many different meetups and communities around the world. So one of the ones that I organized, Creative Morning Singapore, that's in 180 plus cities, right? And they're free breakfast lecture series. You can go to any of them and you just pop in. And if you're a creative or you're interested in the creative, work or field, then it's the perfect spot for you to start networking, right? So think about the type of networks you're going to connect with, but definitely go on the ground first. The other is, well, obviously the, co-working spaces, going into these hubs, as we call them, right? And let them know that you're exploring to either work digitally or
Uh-oh.
Hi guys, I think we had some technical difficulties.
I wasn't sure if it was just me.
No, for some reason it just cut out, but that's what it is. So anyways, just quickly, because I know there's a Sherilyn's question as well, but Chambers of Commerce, always a great resource and an amazing place to start networking for new job opportunities, and start getting on their newsletter earlier before you even move in there. I think that's really the key, is to start looking before you get in there. Okay, so now I'm just refreshing my Facebook so that I can see some of the questions and comments. Okay, cool. We are back on. So let's just answer okay, so Sherilyn's got a few questions. I'm going to, before we continue, let's answer these questions so that we don't keep waiting too long. Okay, so first of all, can you tell us a little more about managing relationships and working relationships in a foreign country? And I said, please expand. Do you have a specific example working with people remotely? Sherilyn answered, I'm an introvert, so sometimes finding people that I can trust and relate to are a little tough. What are some of the things you do when you move into a new place? Do you have groups or people you join? Are there red flags you'd look out for? Cool, good questions.
Those are good questions. I like the red flag question. Well, first off, I want to say thanks for the question. Sherilyn, is it? And coming from a fellow introvert over here, I can definitely appreciate what you've put out and some of your concerns. And I think it's a tough one to give like a blanket answer for. It can depend on so many different things. One thing, I think the most basic one is like, try and go in with a positive mindset. I think as an introvert, if it were me, I would probably want to mentally prepare a bit and get extra recharged in energy, because I think the only way to really connect with people is to get yourself out there. And understandably, you're not always in the mood, or you may not be somebody who's going to go to these like 100+ people events. So maybe as you're looking at events and networking events, you're honing in on ones that are more intimate, that are more small. And maybe, it'll be a slower journey of connecting more through people in your network, or second degree contacts, third degree contacts, which you can identify through Facebook or LinkedIn. So if you know that, these sort of one-to-many type scenarios aren't ideal for you, then it's really looking at how you can make networking work for you by doing it in smaller steps and doing it more person to person, and allowing, in a sense, your network and the people you know to help you filter as well. So just being more selective about what types of events you go to, how big they are, who, maybe doing a bit more research around who's going to be at those events, so you can also kind of mentally prepare and have an idea already of like who you'd want to go approach and speak to, and not feel that, like, for me, like breakout rooms are the worst, right? Like you have 30 minutes and you have to go and try and work a room. Some people are really great at it. It's not something I personally like enjoy or thrive at. So just knowing that means just being a bit more selective and self-loving in a sense as you think about your networking strategy and your career search strategy. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think, I agree with a lot of what Sol has said. And I think that the best way, for me, for example, every time I go into a new market, and as much as I'm an extrovert, I think, sometimes extroversion and introversion isn't so much about being out there and being able to talk to people all the time. It's usually about how you gather information, or how you, connect, I guess, or brainstorm, or things like that. So for me, I am extroverted, but when I go to events, I don't actually like to go up to people. That's why I created communities, because I felt it was easier for people to come to me than me to go to people, right? So I'm super extroverted, but I actually, at events, I don't like to go and network with lots of people. I'd rather go and connect with 1 or 2 people and build, my connections that way. Or what I actually do is I'll reach out to my network and I'll say, hey guys, I'm going to go into this market. Or I'll look for communities such as TEDx communities or Creative Mornings communities or communities I already know about in the country that I'm in that may have chapters in other cities. So she says there's so many different ones out there. And I would look at that as my first point of entrance, because then I have a little bit of a connection where I've been like, okay, I've been to one in Singapore, I've been to one in Jakarta or whatever it is. And I kind of have an idea of what the events are going to be like, but also the type of people that they would find. And if my networks, don't have anyone in that country, most of the time someone has a connection in that area that you're going into or that city that you're going into. And that's where I like to, have as my first point of contact, really, because then I feel more comfortable. And I don't like to go to things on my own. I don't mind going to a cafe on my own, but I don't really like to go to networking events on my own. And so, yeah, I usually ask my friends and if not, ask them to refer me to someone that they connect with. And the reason I do that is also because I know my friends are going to be, or my wider network are going to be connected to people that I know would be interested in similar things, or perhaps be able to shed new light on a place or a city, or, have something of connection in some way or form. So definitely your first point of contact should be other networks. And trust is a hard thing, when it's about people in general. You never know, right? Whether you're in your home country or in other parts of the world, people can be a certain way face value and they can break your trust. So it's really hard, but like Sol said, keep an open mind. And I think more than anything is something when we're interacting in cultures is just bearing in mind. And that's where it's like, how do you build your cultural intelligence, right? Because so many times when we go from one culture to another, there's so many things that we may think is offensive, or from one culture to another, let's say, right? Or we might think is annoying, or vice versa, right? Or maybe it's you shake hands versus like bowing, or, there's so many nuances and cultural differences that can sometimes make us feel like that person isn't really connecting with us in their true self, but it might just be a cultural difference. So I think bearing that in mind as well when we're going into new countries is that just because someone doesn't talk to you or whatever doesn't mean that they don't like you or that they're cold, or, just thinking about where you're moving or networking in, and see how, and maybe even read up about how they network, right? There may be different ways, like maybe business cards is a no-no, right? Whereas in other countries, you need to have business cards. So think about those things as well. And that can help you, I guess, gel a little bit more when you network somewhere else.
Yeah, totally. And maybe just one more point to add on that, which is just an extension of what you're saying, Grace, is also, I guess, that's why things like connecting on interests, on common interests, even activities, is just, it's so much better because it allows you to focus on what you have in common, right? Rather than focusing on the differences. And you learn about the differences and you learn to kind of accept and exchange on those things later on as relationships builds. And that's kind of the general rule of thumb with all sort of social connections, So I think even if it's initially, if you're thinking more about like social relationships and friendships, I think, if you like music, if you like a certain type of events, if, whether it's co-working spaces or whatever, as an example, I just spent 3 weeks in Taiwan, and I was wanting to connect with different communities. And as I said, I'm not one to go to like really big events. Facebook is actually really great for that, not just through your personal context, but interest groups. So I actually stumbled on some really cool, like small, decent size, like 20 to 30 online groups that were all around like, some of them were founders, some of them were expat business owners, some of them were looking for a certain type of cuisine in Taiwan. So even connecting on that level can lead to so many different types of conversations and interactions. So I think, kind of focus on the similarities more so and see what grows from there.
Awesome. She said, yes. Charlene said, yes, totally relate to that. Yes, research and gathering info makes a lot of sense. Thanks for answering the question according to your personal takes and gives me perspective. Awesome.
Nice.
Thanks for the question.
Cool. So maybe, sorry, are there any others? I know you've got your eyeballs on there, Grace. Are there any others?
All good for now. I'm
okay,
just checking.
Cool. So maybe just as a quick wrap up, so obviously we've got a nice little curated list of a bunch of sites and helpful resources that can be helpful for like job search, career search, even just some like travel sites or sort of expat related types of resources. I won't read them all out, but what I will share is the categories just to get you thinking about different channels and ways to think about it on top of what we've already shared. So, one thing, the more obvious ones are things like international job sites and company boards. So Jobbatical is one of, I think, our favorites. Idealist is one that's been around for ages that I used to always stay on top of for more of your, I guess, nonprofit or how do you call them? International research institutes. They have quite an interesting but niche sort of set of different opportunities. There's a few other like DICE, LinkUp, Naukri. We can share all of these separately. But also, so there's international job and company boards where companies or these sites tend to aggregate different job listings, but then there's also job listings. So as an example, The Guardian has a really great international job listing section, and you can actually select to have job alerts as well so that you're getting them in your inbox. So there's others just like that. So that's just another way to look at, or another strategy to look at how these sources and resources can work for you. Then, of course, there's job search engines, which is totally different from the other two, right? Because here you can kind of put in your terms. So I recently read that Google has its own Google career search functionality now. I think it's like careers.google.com or something. We'll check it and we'll put it in our blog and in your tip sheet, so don't worry. But some of the other like well-known ones are like things like Glassdoor, Indeed, Simply Hired, and there's loads more that are more region, geography, or city, country specific. So that's another thing to think about. And then there's also niche job sites. So those are more like sector or industry or type of work specific. So probably a little bit more US heavy is like Media Bistro, for example. So lots of advertising, marketing, media jobs. Then you've got something like Cool Works, which is for people who are more like outdoor enthusiasts. Then they've got like Sales Gravy for salespeople, Energy Job Line for energy. So there's really like a lot out there that can be sector specific. So, and it's hard to find, it takes time to really dig these sites out. So I think, be a bit smart and strategic in your search as well. But there's heaps out there. And like I said, we'll share more. In Asia, there's also lots of like startup job sites. Some of the more well-known ones are like Startup Jobs Asia, Tech in Asia, E27. And then, depending if you're transitioning or you're looking at different sort of temporary jobs or flexi jobs initially until you find something more permanent. Then there's things like flex jobs, Upwork, freelancer. So those are things that might tie you over, or as Grace had said earlier, if you decide to spend some time in a city or a country you're looking at before even making a big move, then that could be something good to just like support extra income. The other thing to look at sometimes is online magazines and blogs. So I think one of our favorites is The Muse. They tend to have regular listings of like best companies to work for, companies that are currently hiring, companies that have great culture. So those are kind of like, it's not necessarily job sites, but those like making sure you're getting their regular newsletter and updates is always a great way to just keep a tap on what's going on. And then, like I said, there's others that are a little bit more travel-oriented or expat-oriented, and those might just be good to get an understanding of different cities, cultures, norms, like we talked about earlier. In some cases, they have articles around like top cities to work in different parts of the world, So it's nice to just kind of keep a pulse of all of those things, so that it's also like not a full-blown, like overwhelming research all in one go. If you already start like subscribing to newsletters and getting alerts, like Grace said, then it's nice. You just get that information regularly on the go. So lots more, and we'll share that in our blog. And then the last one, actually should have been the first one, is our Career Shifters group. God damn it, how did I not mention that, Grace? So our Career Shifters group is obviously something, if you're not in there already, just have a search in Facebook. We share lots of resources in there all around career shifting, of course, but we also share a ton of listings as and when they come through our network. So they're not like sort of just random listings. They're usually ones that people, partners, friends of ours around the world are sharing with us, with specifically for our community. So if you'd like to have an additional resource where we're doing the search or actually providing the outputs for you and you don't have to search as much, then jump in there and just keep on top of whatever we share there. I think that's it.
So I think we're going to have a bunch in the tip sheets or in the cheat sheet so that you can download it, keep it in your diary or in your journal or whatever it is. And we'll also have some Facebook groups that you can join, you know, that maybe are more specific to the digital nomads space, but definitely our career shifters group. And I think, you know, just one last thing I really wanted to you know, just add, I guess, that we forgot in the beginning is when you're looking for jobs, think about certain regions where maybe more heavy for nonprofit work or social entrepreneurship or sustainability. So depending on your sector, like, okay, Singapore doesn't have perhaps as many large not-for-profit organizations per se, but Jakarta or Bangkok or Cambodia would, right? So if you're looking and you're open to moving wherever, but it's more important for you to find a job in the same industry, just bear in mind, right? And that's just going back to our news side, that'll really just help you. So hopefully today's session has given you a good kind of whole-rounded picture on things. And we've got a bunch more that we're going to come out with in the next few weeks. So I've posted in there our Career Shifters Facebook group. I've posted our Change School TV recap, which you can watch in the next, or you can read in the next 24 hours. Jump on, you know, over there and check it out. And we'll be back next Monday, 8:30. This was not as short and sweet as we thought it was.
I know. Despite my best efforts, sometimes just can't stop talking. Sorry.
So same. I think, you know, we'll just never start the conversation when it's going to be short and sweet.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically, we'll be back next Monday, 8:30 p.m. Singapore time. And feel free to share this with anyone that you know is going to get value from this. The more people that we see, you know, move into a job they love, the better we feel about everything. So help us feel better by sharing this so that we know we're adding or creating more impact in more people's lives. Okay, cool. Thanks, guys, for watching, and enjoy the rest of your Monday. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
See ya.